And that's why I encourage people to visit the schools that they apply to, right? Like, check out the campus, meet the faculty members, meet the students, email them, talk to them on the phone. What's up, fam? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phil Sarpon, and this is Phil's Guide to PsyD. If it's your first time here, welcome. This channel is dedicated to psychology, to wellness, as well as to clinical psychology doctoral school. All right, so today I am answering your guys' questions about clinical psychology, the application process, basically the most frequently asked questions, whether it was on the YouTube channel, Instagram, or some of you actually also did email me as well. And so I'm picking 20 questions that I'm going to answer in this video. These are the most frequently asked questions so far that we've been here on the YouTube channel. And so if I did not get to your question, I apologize in advance. Maybe I'll do a part 2 of this in the future where I answer more questions. But if you have other questions, definitely keep putting them in the comment section below. Keep reaching out to me through email or Instagram. I want to get to them as soon as possible, all right? But today we're going to answer the 20 most frequently asked questions about clinical psychology school. So here we go. All right, so the first question is, what is a good major for clinical psychology in college? Here's the thing. I think the thing that I also want to kind of advocate for other students and kind of encourage is that, honestly, major in something that you are interested in. If you're interested in the arts, if you're interested in the social science, if you're interested in the hard sciences, major in whatever your interest or your passion is. And then when you do apply to clinical psychology school or graduate school or whatever it is, you can always fulfill the prerequisites or the classes that you are going to have to take in order to apply, right? So for example, actually, a lot of the people in my cohort, you know, some applied, some were majors in sociology, some were business majors, but they took all the classes that they needed. They took all the psychology classes that they needed in order to actually apply for clinical psychology school. So, and it does depend on school to school, but basically, for the most part, as long as schools know that you're interested in psychology and you've taken the necessary psychology classes in order to apply to their program, you can honestly major in whatever you like. They do like to see a wide variety and a diverse array of majors when it comes to picking students or prospective students. And so for me, for example, I actually majored in neuroscience, and I know a number of people that majored in business or in social sciences. So what I would encourage people is major in your main interest, right? Major in what you like to learn, what you like to do. And if that's psychology, then that's great. If it's neuroscience, that's great. You know, if it's some type of other science, that's great. But I would encourage you to pick whatever your interest is first. Now, if you're really just looking just to get ready for clinical psychology school or some other psychology graduate program, then of course psychology is probably your best, your safest choice. If you're looking into neuropsychology or, you know, becoming sort of a teacher or professor, you know, neuroscience might be a good major as well, but it is a little bit more difficult because it has some more of the hard sciences. So if you don't like the hard sciences, then maybe neuroscience might not be for you. But just to kind of be aware for that, you know. The other thing is people like to also major in biology. I think that's great as well. The thing about clinical psychology school is that it will mostly focus on psychology stuff, but we do take some classes where it relates to the basics of biology and the human body, as well as the neuro part, the neuroanatomy and the neurophysiology of the brain in relation to some of the neuropsychology classes that we take. And if you want to go to the safest choice, of course, if it deals with psychology, if it deals with mental health, then psychology probably is your safest choice. All right, question number 2. Can you still get into grad school with a bad GPA? Most graduate programs are going to require a minimum of a 3.0 GPA in order to even apply to their program. All right, so if you're below a 3.0, a lot of times you won't even be able to apply to those clinical psychology programs. Now, what if your GPA is right at that cutoff, right? What if it's like around 3.0, 3.1, and you know, should you still apply to clinical psychology school? Again, it depends on what school you're going to apply to, right? Because if you're going to apply to the top 10 or the top 15 clinical psychology programs in the country who are really only taking 3.5 GPAs and above, right, then that's not going to be something that's going to be an option for you. And so you could probably choose schools that holistically are going to look not just at the GPA, but also at the GRE level, research, clinical experience, all of those things they're going to take into factor. All right, so even if you have a low GPA, a lot of times you can try and make up for it in other areas, right? And so even if you have a low GPA, maybe you have a ton of really great research experience or really great clinical experience, or you have really good letters of recommendation, or you destroy the GRE. I mean, if you destroy the GRE, that basically makes up a little bit for your low GPA. All right, so those are just some things to think about, that even if you have a low GPA, it's not the end of the world. All that means is that you have to have other parts of your application that are really strong, that are a little bit above average in order to kind of make up for that low GPA. So I don't want to deter anybody. Even if you have a low GPA, there's obviously still going to be a chance that you can get into grad school, but you might just have to work a little bit harder on all the other areas of your application. All right, but just keep that in mind that most schools do have a cutoff GPA of 3.0. And there are some schools, like the top schools, that will only take 3.5 GPAs and above. So just be aware of that when you're choosing the clinical psychology programs to apply to. The other thing is that you could actually even maybe call one of these schools, email one of these schools and say, hey, like, what is the average range of GPA that you guys normally accept? Or, will you guys accept a low GPA? And maybe some of those people on the other end of the admissions will contact you and let you know, like, yeah, go ahead and apply. When you apply, you don't want to just throw away your money to these schools and then get, an automatic rejection because you weren't paying attention to some of the guidelines that they had. And sometimes that's just basically having a variety of schools, having maybe your top choices that are maybe a little bit harder to get into, like 2 or 3, and then having like 3 or 4 schools that you're like, okay, I think I can kind of get into these schools, and then having like 1 or 2 options that perhaps for sure that you could get into, right? So like having that wide variety of options to apply to grad school or clinical psychology school, I think will set you up for the best, for the future. All right, next question is how to choose the right grad school. And again, this is such a good question because honestly, a lot of times when it comes to clinical psychology schools, if they are APA approved, that is the best bet that you have in terms of it being a really good school, right? So if you're going for those APA approved schools, you can almost guarantee that you're going to go into a good program, you're going to become a good licensed clinical psychologist, and you're going to be just fine, right? Like most of these programs are going to be teaching the same courses because the APA actually makes sure that APA approved schools are teaching the courses that they want to teach, right? So for the most part, regardless of what clinical psychology program that you go into, you're going to get fairly the same education. Now, you might be a little different in terms of the variance between how good professors are or how good research labs are, but for the most part, if you pick an APA approved school, that's pretty a good safe bet that you're going to be in a good spot. Now, the other thing though that you can do, and this is a lot of times it really just comes to chemistry, right? Like, and that's why I encourage people to visit the schools that they apply to, right? Like, check out the campus, meet the faculty members, meet the students, email them, talk to them on the phone, get a feel for the school. If you feel like that it's a good chemistry vibe between you and the students and the faculty members, it's probably a good indicator that you'll do just fine in the program. All right, so number 1, see if you can visit the school. The other thing is, of course, see if you can talk to somebody at the school. See if you can talk to a professor or a faculty member or a student. Again, just to ask them those questions, ask them those hard questions, and get a feel or the layout for if that program is going to be the right fit for you. Sometimes at the end of the day, it just comes down to what school gives you the most scholarships. Sometimes it comes down to what school is going to be the most cost-efficient school for you, right? If you're going to pick a school that's closer to you, it might be a little bit easier in terms of saving money with housing or apartment or whatever it is, like living at home. So there's a lot of different factors that go into picking the right school. It's not just about the program, but it's also about your lifestyle, the way that you live, how you want to save money, how you want to pay for the school, and even some of the scholarships that they may give you where they may not give you in other schools. So those are all things to weigh in terms of the pros and cons of picking the right school. But I encourage you to do a little bit of a chart in terms of doing all the pros and cons, like listing out pros and cons of each school that you apply to. And I think at the end of the day, like once you really, especially when you visit the school and you talk to the people, you'll go with your gut feeling. Go with whatever you feel like is going to be the right choice for you. All right, so next question is, what is a good GRE score? I kind of already hinted at this earlier in terms of it's not necessarily about the score. You want to do good, right? You want to do the best you can at the GRE. Work hard, study hard, all of those things. Some schools do have a cutoff for the GRE, so you want to make sure you meet those cutoffs if you're going to apply to that program. But the other thing is this, all right? Most schools, and here generally most people understand that the GRE is not the best indicator for how successful someone's going to be in grad school. It really just is a measure just to test people, right? And the biggest thing that you can do is that, honestly, if you get average on your score and you have other areas of your application that are above average, you should be okay, right? So it doesn't mean that you should spend every single hour or minute or second studying for the GRE. You should definitely put in that time, but just understand that it's not going to be the heaviest weighted application material in the process. Most of the times they're going to look at other things in your application. So as long as your GRE score doesn't hurt you, as long as you don't get a really low score, as long as you do the best that you can do and you have other things in your application process that can kind of buffer your results, I think you're gonna be okay, all right? So again, it's not about the score, because again, there's some schools that don't care about the GRE score, and then there's schools that do care about the GRE score, right? So that kind of goes back into kind of doing your investigative work in terms of, yeah, like what kind of scores you guys accepting, what are your expectations, especially before you apply to that school, kind of knowing a general basis of where the school is at in terms of how they look at the GRE. All right, next question is, what if I'm applying internationally? Do I have a good chance of getting into a school? Another great question. I wish I had more sort of substance in terms of giving you guys some information, those people that are looking internationally to go into United States, American clinical psychology programs. All I'll say is this, is that again, most programs are going to look holistically at their cohort, at their process. They're going to want a diverse group, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's internationally, whatever it is. Most programs understand that the more diversity that they have within their programs, even from a faculty ratio or even from the student ratio, is going to be really effective for the school and is going to produce a lot of really good clinical psychologists. So I do know that there's a lot of schools that really do spend the extra time and money making sure that they can reach out to international students, and international students have a good chance of getting into their programs. It kind of goes back to emailing the schools and getting information through the schools, and maybe even getting into contact with international people that are already in clinical psychology schools here in the US. So all of that depends, but what I've seen and what I've heard from other people is that there is a number of schools that are looking to really diversify their cohorts internationally, gender, race, whatever it is, all right? So hopefully that should be encouraging for those international students that are looking to apply to graduate school. Next question is number 6. Do you need a master's to go into grad school? This is a question that I've been getting for so long, and the short answer is no. In order to apply to clinical psychology schools here in the States, you do not need a master's. Now, depending on your situation, getting a master's might make you more competitive in terms of certain other programs, but it is by no means a requirement. Even in my cohort, a third of us, I think, have a master's, and then another 2/3 don't have a master's. So it's definitely something, again, that the schools are just going to look to diversify their cohorts. They're going to want people to have a master's in their cohort, and they're probably going to pick people that come straight out of college. right? It really is just gonna be more of a mixture that they're looking for. All right, question number 7. How hard is grad school? I tell people this all the time. Grad school, it is kind of hard, but it's more so just busy. You're more so balancing a lot of things. You're balancing school, you're balancing research, you're balancing your dissertation, you're going through things with your clinical practice. A lot of the homework is related to papers and presentations and group projects. There is some classes that are a little bit more heavy on quizzes. There's other classes that are heavy on exams. It really depends on the teacher. It also depends on the class. But for the most part, from what I've experienced myself, is that it's just more so busy work. And if you can just stay organized and you can kind of just stay on top of all of the little things that you have to get done, it's a lot easier, right? And so it doesn't necessarily mean that grad school is easy. It just means that you're just going to be busy. You are most likely going to be busy and juggling a lot of things. The other thing is, number 8, should you go to a PsyD program right after your bachelor's? And again, this goes back to, it depends on you. If you feel like you're ready, if you feel like you've gotten research experience, you've gotten clinical experience, even while you were in college, you've done good on your GREs, your GPA is okay, and you want to just go right into clinical psychology school, that's on you. If you want to do that, then by all means, apply to those programs. If you feel like you're ready, then you're probably ready, right? You could probably ask your advisors or your mentors to see what they think as well in terms of getting a second or a third opinion. But honestly, that's the thing. I mean, if you can skip the master's program and go straight into a clinical psychology program, that's great because you save money and you save time, right? If you want a couple years just to relax and chill, and that's better for your mental health, by all means, then go for that. But it really is kind of up to you in terms of going straight into clinical psychology school. The nice thing is that if you do go straight into clinical psychology school right after getting your bachelor's, you're going to get done earlier in general with school. You're going to be able to pay off your student loans back. All of those things you're going to be able to do a little bit faster than everybody else, than someone that took 2 years going through a master's program or took a couple years. Number 9, what can I do to make my application stand out? 2 big things, honestly, 2 big things is research experience and clinical experience, all right? You can get average on the GPA, on your GRE, but something that really does, I think, in my opinion, really stand out is when you have a lot of great research experience, when you have a lot of great clinical experience. And the clinical experience doesn't have to necessarily be related specifically to psychology or mental health. It could be related to the physical, medical health. It could be related to a number of things, social services, right? All that matters is that you have experience in some type of way, engaging in some type of field that deals with people, that deals with communicating to people, empathizing with people, learning from people, working in groups. I think that's really the biggest thing when it comes to these things, all right? So if you can get that research experience, that clinical experience, I think that's really gonna help you and prepare you for grad school. Number 10, can you have a job during grad school? The answer is yes. Yes, you can do a job. You can get a part-time job in grad school. It's definitely possible. Probably more possible in the first year. From the second and third and fourth year, it gets a little bit more tricky because there's a lot of things that start piling up with research and dissertation and clinical stuff. But it is possible. If you are going to look into a part-time job, it's good if that job has flexible hours. I think that's probably the most important thing. You want a job that you can either do on the side as a side hustle, or you can put in, a number of different work hours depending on the week of your schedule and how hard things are in certain times of the year. But if your job can be flexible, something like a receptionist, something like a research assistant or a teacher's assistant or a psychometrician, something where those people that are hiring you know that you are a graduate student and they're going to be flexible as much as they can with you in terms of your schedule. I think that's really, really important. All right, so yes, take heart. You can definitely get a part-time job in grad school. Number 11, halfway there. Any tips for those who will be starting their first year of grad school? Yes, tip number 1, make friends in your cohort, make relationships. Try and have a sort of that chemistry in your cohort where people want to help each other. When you're in grad school, it's not so much you're competing with your fellow cohort mates. It's not that at all. You are not competing with anybody once you get into grad school. Now you guys should just be helping each other out. So definitely make relationships, make friends. The other thing is start on research opportunities early. Even if you can't start on your dissertation right away in your first year and your second year, you can still go through a lot of research opportunities. You can get some publications from your faculty director. You can maybe make some posters for different presentations and conferences. You can get on somebody else's research work and help them and collaborate with them. I think the more research experience that you can get early on is actually going to help you in terms of when you do your own research work for your dissertation. So definitely research experience is important. And then the other thing is, honestly, if you're about to start grad school, just have fun, enjoy the moment. It passes by, it goes by so quickly. So have fun while you're there. Take note of the memories, really enjoy your experiences. Don't only, spend time studying with your cohort members, but actually do some stuff outside of class. All right, so number 12, what is the difference between a master's level therapist and a PsyD? This is a great question, and honestly, the biggest difference is that psychologists don't just do therapy, they also do more than therapy. They do psychological assessments, they can do a battery of testing for someone's mental health, they can diagnose, they can do neuropsychology testing, they can do a number of things, and sometimes they may even be able to prescribe medication. So the biggest difference is that psychologists can do more in the mental health field, whereas for therapists, master levels therapists like a licensed professional counselor or a licensed marriage family therapist or a licensed clinical social worker, they may have to refer their clients to other specialties for other additional psychological testing. All right, so just keep that in mind as you're trying to figure out the differences between master's levels therapists and psychology, PsyD, or Ph.D. programs in clinical psychology. Number 13, can you still get clinical jobs with a master's, with just a master's in psychology? The answer to this is yes. Even with a master's in psychology, you may be able to get actually a number of different jobs. This could be related to research. This could also be related to being a psychometrician. So what a psychometrician is a psychometrician will either work with psychiatrists or psychologists, and they'll be the ones to actually give the test to the patient. They may not actually assess the test or diagnose or anything like that, but they're related to just giving the test, understanding how the test is formulated and things like that. So psychometrician is a big one. If you have a master's in psychology, I know that psychometricians actually get paid way more if they have a master's in psychology. So that's a big one. Research is obviously a big one. You could probably be some type of aid to a therapist or a psychologist or even a psychiatrist. You could be a psychiatrist aide or a therapist aide, related to even perhaps behavioral therapy, where a lot of companies will actually train you. They'll get you certified and you'll be able to work with a number of different populations, whether that's related to autism or whether that's related to ADHD or whatever that is, right? Related to that organization. And so there is a number of things that you can do. It depends on the state with their different guidelines, depends on the company, it depends on the clinic that's hiring students or hiring people that are graduating from psychology programs. If you graduate from a master's in psychology, sometimes it's either you have a little bit more experience in the clinical side or you have a little bit more experience in the research side. And depending on what experience you have, that can guide you in terms of what jobs that you can actually get from there. All right, so absolutely you can definitely get some jobs with a master's in psychology. Number 14, can you become a neuropsychologist by going to a PsyD program? Absolutely yes. So not only can you go into a clinical psychology PhD or PsyD program and become a neuropsychologist, you can obviously also go to a PhD in neuropsychology or PsyD in neuropsychology and do that in that same format. But you can also go the clinical psychology route. And from there, once you go into a clinical psychology school, some schools have different focuses on neuropsychology. You would take all of those additional classes. Your practicum sites should be neuropsychology. And then you'd want to get into a neuropsychology internship site. You'd also want to do a 2-year postdoc in neuropsychology and then get your licensure and your certification in neuropsychology. All right, so a little bit of a longer process perhaps in clinical psychology, but still you can definitely go the route of clinical psychology and do neuropsychology things, be certified, be licensed as a neuropsychologist. Number 15, what are the big milestones to getting a PsyD? Okay, a couple things. Number one, when you go into a PsyD or PhD program, most schools, again, you have to have above a 3.0 to stay in the program. This is for most schools, all right? Number two, there's a comprehensive exam usually after the second year, right? That's gonna cover your things from your first year and your second year. So that's a huge exam that you're gonna wanna pass. Number three, you're gonna wanna pass your qualifying exams. This is more of the clinical practice things and nature of making sure that you are proficient and competent as a future clinical psychologist. Number four is you're gonna wanna defend your dissertation. So that's a huge milestone in itself. Number five, you're gonna wanna get an APA approved internship. And number six, you're gonna wanna pass your EPPP licensure exam in order to actually become a licensed psychologist. And then from there, possibly complete a 1 to 2 year postdoc. So there's a lot of things involved, but if you take it step by step, those are really the biggest milestones in order to actually become finally a psychologist, all right? Number 16, what pays more, a PsyD or a PhD? Wow, another great question. So technically, the PhD would pay more generally. But here's the thing, there's a couple things, right? First of all, PhDs have been around longer than PsyDs. They just have, just historically they have. Now, the thing with PhDs in clinical psychology is that most PhDs, not most, but a lot of schools are gonna hire PhDs as professors, as faculty members. Here's the reason for this. Most people that go into a PsyD want to do clinical practice. And most people that go into PhDs, they can do clinical practice, but a lot of them also want to do research. And if they're going to do research, they're most likely going to teach and work for a doctoral program, right? So here's the thing. If you look online, you'll see that in terms of salaries, people that work in doctoral schools are generally paid a little bit more than people that might work in a clinical practice, either at a hospital or at a mental health clinic, right? Generally, people that have tenured positions at a PhD school in clinical psychology are generally gonna get paid a little bit more. And again, those schools are most likely gonna hire more PhDs than PsyDs, not necessarily because PhDs are better than PsyDs, but just because more people that have PhDs are going to want to do research and teach. So I think that's part of the reason why PhD salaries tend to be a little bit higher than PsyDs. But at the end of the day, they really are the same thing. Honestly, if you just look at in terms of what they focus on, they may focus on a little bit of a different thing. But for sure, PsyDs can also teach in clinical doctoral programs. They can also do the research as well. It's not so much if you want to just do clinical practice, you just become a PsyD. You can do either the PhD or the PsyD and become a competent, proficient clinical psychologist. It really just does depend on your interest and where you work. All right, so number 17, what's the difference between neuroscientists, neuropsychologists, and clinical psychologists? Basically, for neuroscientists, they have PhDs in neuroscience. And a lot of times, they don't have a license to be able to conduct therapy. All right, they may know a lot of the psychological assessments, but they don't have the licensure where they can actually do therapy with clients. So they work mainly more on research and academia and being professors and things like that for neuroscience. Clinical psychologists can do therapy, psychological assessments, all of those things. Neuropsychologists are mainly specializing for patients that are going through neurological diseases, things like epilepsy, things like seizures, ADHD, dementia, all of those different things, right? And they're they're assessing, they're diagnosing, but they're also assessing and giving treatment options for different cognitive rehabilitation programs or procedures to help people cognitively in that way. Number 19, what are some good jobs you can get when preparing for grad school or even in grad school? And I kind of already mentioned this. If you are looking for jobs to prepare you for grad school, anything that has to do with a psychometrician, any type of behavioral therapy, and any type of research assistant is going to be really, really good. If you are already in grad school, looking into being a teacher's assistant, a TA, or even some type of receptionist in the front desk of some type of department is also going to be really good. Again, any job that is flexible, that has to do with some type of social service to people, where you're interacting with people, you're building up your people skills, you're building up your rapport with people, I think is great. And if it's flexible, it also gives you that amount of time where you can basically choose when you can study and when you can go to class, when you can do other social events as well in your free time. So finally, we are at number 20. How to stand out in your clinical psychology interview. I've done a number of videos about this, but honestly, the big key thing is that you want to do your research on this school. You want to pick the right schools to apply to. And when you do your research on the schools and you know the faculty members and you know what the school is about, you can ask the right questions. It's good not only to ask a lot of questions, but really the more important thing is asking good quality questions. The more good quality questions that you can ask, that's really going to be the thing that makes you stand out from other students. Especially because the faculty member is going to realize, like, wow, this person is asking really good questions, perhaps better questions than the other students, and they're going to see your interest and your passion within their program. All right, so obviously, dress to impress, do your best, be yourself, get to know people, ask a lot of questions, but ask a lot of good questions about the program. I think that's what's really going to help you to stand out in your interview. All right. So those are 20 questions, guys. Those are the 20 most frequently asked questions, whether it's been through the YouTube channel, people emailing me, people hitting me up on Instagram. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. If you guys are looking to apply to clinical psychology school or just trying to figure out whether clinical psychology is for you or not, hopefully some of those questions kind of gave you a better perspective and a little bit more of a clearer view of what clinical psychology school could be like for you. All right. If you have any more questions, definitely put it down in the comment section below. Again, if you have not already, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.